Hi, everybody. It's Katie Harris, owner and CEO of Nursepreneurs, and today I am here with Eric Dorsey. I'm very excited. Welcome, Eric. Um, so Eric is a nurse and an author, and he's going to tell us all about both, actually, today. So if you have questions, comments, be sure to put them into the comment section as we go along, and we can ask Eric any questions we come up with. And well, maybe related to nursing and books, keep it to that. But Eric, why don't you give us a little bit of background about yourself as a nurse? What kind of nurse are you? And we'll take it from there.
Okay, well, hello everybody, and I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me. And to anybody who watches this recorded later, hello to you as well. I'm a nephrology nurse currently, inpatient only, so mostly dialysis with some apheresis, working in a hospital. But my background is ICU, and I did that until I burned out. And I got really interested in nephrology, working with a nephrologist in ICU capacity and doing CRRT, the continuous renal replacement therapy, which I thought was super cool. And I really enjoy being a dialysis nurse, and it's incredibly autonomous. It's really easy to travel and go to different hospitals. And it's a very concrete benefit to the patients. You watch the numbers. I've had multiple times where I was running a hyperkalemic in the ICU, and they've got peak T waves and wide QRSs from their potassium being high, and 45 minutes into treatment, it resolves, and you're like, yeah, I did that. You're welcome. So that's really a rewarding part of that job. Before that, to back up a little farther, I have a background in finance, and I spent 10 years doing analytics. I have a master's in math, but I didn't find that very rewarding, and finally found my calling and going back to nursing school, and worked on an ambulance while I was in nursing school, and that was great. And ICU experience was amazing, and like I said, I like being nephrology now.
So you went from finance, you were 10 years in finance, got a master's in math, then went to nursing. What was the impetus for changing from math to nursing?
Well, I had a pretty successful career in finance, and sort of a white picket fence life. And I did analytics at the back office with my math degree, and all that. The crash in 2008, that's kind of what I was doing. And basically, I would sit at my desk and wonder what the point was, as I was watching the bank's bottom dollar and not really helping anybody. And when the crash happened, I was really in high demand. The company threw all kinds of new employees at me, and I was just like, somebody who actually wants to do this needs to be doing this. And that's when I signed up for my EMT, right when that happened, doing that at night. And as soon as I got picked up by an ambulance company, I resigned, and it was just this great weight off my shoulders where I felt like I was actually doing something. But I'll tell you, the transition from like Friday in an office, at my desk at the bank, and then the next Monday with my first shift in an ambulance, and that was talk about a wake-up call. It was quite different. My favorite joke to myself for the first couple of years doing that was, I never saw that at the bank.
Yeah, that must have been exhilarating to go from a desk job to like EMT life.
Yeah, my first call was a ridiculous bed sore where the guy had fallen out of bed and ripped it open. I had never seen so much blood, and I was just like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
It really helped him out, and
yeah,
felt good about it afterwards. And I was just like, that one call was enough for me to be like, okay, this is so much better. I'm actually really doing something now instead of just playing with numbers.
Yeah. No, that's really exciting, and that's a really hard transition to do, to go from like a comfortable, well-paying job to the complete unknown. And I'm sure that you went from with a master's in math to EMT. You must have taken some sort of pay cut, but it doesn't matter at some level if you're miserable in what you're doing.
Yeah, that's a cute observation, because sometimes people ask me one of the things I'm most proud of, and that's from what I cite, that I took a 90% pay cut to look for meaning.
Yeah, that's huge. So, all right, so you went from EMT to, how did you get into, you decided you were going to be a nurse from EMT?
Well, nursing was always the plan once I left the bank. And EMS was just sort of, it was something I could do at night to get my basic certification, and then I could get some patient care experience while I was doing nursing and have a little bit of an income anyway. And so that was just sort of a transitory job. I had originally thought I would do ER, and working on ambulance cured me of that, though.
Yeah. Oh my God, the ER, that's a special breed of nurse.
It is, yeah.
All right, so you went from, so you started nursing, and where did you go from there? What did you start doing? And
Well, actually, I moved directly out of school so that I scored a day shift ICU job.
that's tough.
Yeah, which is pretty unusual, but I went to a very sort of undesirable low pay location just to do that. And it was kind of a nurse factory there where that people would work a year and then move once they had that year under their belt and could get a better job. And I did that as well. But that was a great experience. Let me tell you, that job, we didn't have any support. Like, we did everything in the ICU. And we were just slammed. It was a level 1 trauma center. And I learned so much in that. I was there a year and a half almost, and it was intense. And I also would rotate through the different ICUs there. So I did trauma ICU, cardiovascular was my primary, and then also just the general ICU where you get a lot of sepsis and alcohol abuse and things like that. And then I just started moving around a little bit. I took full-time jobs in different places. I was very restricted to movement when I was working in finance. There were only a few cities in the US that really would support that level of analytics I was doing. And so I took full advantage of that as a nurse. And actually, my favorite spot where I stayed a number of years was Southern Oregon. And we do miss that. But now I'm in Montana. We got a mountain in my backyard. I tried earlier to see if I could show you guys, but it's so sunny, it bleeds out. But it's beautiful. And it's been great just being able to move around. And I did live in my van for a little while, which was, again, quite a transition from my house and finance. And I had a few years single as a nurse, and that's when I would sleep in the hospital parking lot during the day, or not during the day, but while I was working. And security all knew me. There was actually 4 of us that did that at that hospital. And then I'd work week on, week off. My off weeks, I'd just go to national parks and trail run.
How long did you do that for?
Well, I was full time in the van for about 6 months, and I'll tell you that's overrated. And the worst part about it was while I was working, because the sun would just bake my van during the day, and then it'd still be 80, 85 degrees in the van at night when I'm trying to sleep. So what I ended up doing, I don't know if this is probably still interesting. It's a little tangential, but I bought a 400 square foot cabin in the mountains in the Southern Cascades. That was like 45 minutes from the hospital I worked at. So when I was working, I was in the van. I had a great place to go if it was too hot. I also rented the cabin, so if it was rented, I'd just be like, okay, I'll stay in my van tonight. And then I kept up the life. I did that for a couple of years, where I had the cabin sort of in my back pocket if I was miserable in the van, and then I still spent a lot of time in national parks, Oregon coast, anywhere within 12 hours of Southern Oregon, which was pretty generous.
And so, just to be clear, that was your choice, right? You decided that you wanted to do that.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it was a pretty nice van. I mean, it was pretty cost effective since it was my only living situation. I had basically no expenses. And the cabin rented enough to pay for itself as well. So it was a really good lifestyle, and I actually do miss it quite a bit. But yeah, I fell in love, and that's kind of a one person lifestyle.
Right. So I can only imagine knowing you when you first started out, and then like meeting you again maybe a couple years later, and seeing the transition that you had gone through.
Oh, sure. I still hear from like random people through Facebook, especially with the book out now. Marveling at the transition from, I also had, no beard and I had short hair, whereas now it's quite long.
Yeah. They're jealous. They're all jealous because it's like that. It's the freedom that everybody wants, but we all somehow get tied down into doing whatever.
Right. And the life of part-time living in national parks was universally, everyone was jealous, and it was amazing. I loved that. If I'd had like more, if I could have fit my van in the parking deck at work, so it wouldn't sit in the sun all day, I think I would have done it a lot longer. That was just when you're trying to sleep, and it's too hot. I had to look like I was a night shift nurse, just parked there. I couldn't like open up everything, and
Right.
So.
So how did you get into authorship? Like, how did you go from nurse to author?
Well, that's a fair question. Pretty much my whole life and all my degrees, and even when I was at the bank, I wrote a lot of policies and procedures because I was the head of a department. Everybody always told me I should write. I was very, I guess, clear. I did a lot of creative writing in my free time, and my attention to detail, with more formalized writing is very high. And so that was always something I was interested in and wanted to try. And I had this idea for a book even before I was a nurse. I remember talking to my girlfriend about it in my 20s, and I just never motivated to do it. And for anyone who's interested, I got to say my number one piece of advice is just sit down and start writing. The writing experience was wonderful. I loved writing the book and getting to know my characters, and seeing I felt like a god because I would put them in situations and then just see how they reacted. I was not a plotter. They call it. I was much more a pantser. They call it, where you define your character and then let them do what they're going to do in various situations. Like George R. R. Martin of Game of Thrones is probably the most famous pantser, where he doesn't really plot much at all and just goes forward. And that was my approach as well, and it was very rewarding. But to back up to your question of how I got into it, once I was living in the van and I had my cabin, I had plenty of money really because I didn't have any expenses and the cabin rented all the time. I went part-time in nursing with the intent of trying to actually write this novel I've been thinking about for years. And that's sort of when it came into being. It only took me about 6 months maybe to do the actual writing when I was still part-time in doing nephrology nursing at the hospital. So I'd work 4 shifts and then 10 shifts off. So 2 shifts a week, and I'd shove them together. And then I would go somewhere and write, either in my cabin or I'd sit around in Yosemite and look at the view and put my feet up in my hammock and write my book. That piece of my lifestyle was very rewarding as well.
Yeah, that sounds very like dreamy and romantic, but at the same time, like I mean, how do you actually sit down and write? Because I can sit and fantasize about a plot all day long, but to actually write it down is a lot of work.
But that's the truth. Yeah, there's no question about that. I think if it hadn't percolated for so long, it would not have come quite so easy. I'm sort of getting ready to, stretch my arms and try a second book now that I've had some success with this one. And that's a bit more daunting because I really am not sure where I will go with it. But again, once I started writing, I was just so surprised. It just came,
What was the inspiration for this story?
Well, that's a good question too. When I looked forward to getting into it, because I decided with this interview, and I'm going to. People are always asking me about my book and what's it about, and I'm never quite sure what to say because it is one of its subgenres is mystery, and I don't want to give away the mystery. But I decided with you guys as nurses that I'm going to offer a small plot spoiler. My friends who've read it, who are nurses, are the ones that tend to pick up on what's going on the fastest. Anyway, so it's not as much of a plot spoiler for you guys. At any rate, have you ever wondered what your patient or what's going through their brain while they're sedated? Well, that was really kind of the impetus for my book, because I spent a lot of time staring at my intubated patients and wondering that same question, because obviously they're not fully conscious, but there's a lot going on under the scenes. And my favorite part about being an ICU nurse is those patients who have a heart attack or whatever, and then they wake up off the ventilator a few days later and they're like, new lease on life. So I'm gonna exercise, I'm gonna eat better. Like, I can't believe I woke up in ICU. Like, what happened? And that was always very rewarding. I love talking to those patients and felt them to be inspiring. And so my idea for the book was, while we're taking care of their physical self on the ventilator and everything else, their brain is kind of in a timeout position and delves into sort of emotional health. So I created this elaborate world within my main character's head, where she's kind of delving back into her past and figuring out where she went wrong in life, and with the idea that maybe she would wake up with a new lease on life, physically and emotionally. I also have a psychology degree, which I did in my 30s just for fun, because I searched for self. I've always thought psychology was interesting, and that's really where the plot comes from in the book. So it's kind of nursing sedated brain with fentanyl and propofol on board. And you'll see that those of you who, especially if you've worked in ICU, you'll see that drip into the plot, and that's how some of my nursing friends sort of figure out what exactly is going on. And then the plot itself is driven by my psychology degree, where I gave my main character something of an attachment disorder from a traumatizing experience in her youth, and she spends her life pushing people away and so on and so forth, and finds herself living in a tiny home similar to my cabin in the mountains, and wondering how she got there alone. And then she has an accident, and her defense mechanisms stripped away, pushing people away. She needs to lean on her friends, so on and so forth. Catharsis. And it gets a lot of one of my favorite, some of the favorite feedback I get that I see in like Amazon reviews and things like that, is it gets people to think about friendships they lost over the years and why. And I had several people reach out to me through social media saying they reconnected with high school friends and things like that. And, that's really what I was going for.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, I don't think I mean, I haven't read the book yet myself, but I don't think that's a plot spoiler, because it sounds like that's just, I love the premise of that. That sounds really interesting. That the idea of what's going on in their mind. The other thing I wanted to say is I thought you were 30, but with all these degrees, oh my goodness.
I appreciate that. Young. Thank you.
But so psychology, math, nursing, I mean, you just have this incredible experience and wealth to pull on. So when you were coming up with a plot, what was kind of like that overarching framework that you were working under? Is it this concept of lost friendships, or how?
Yeah, I think just to be frank, it's definitely personal in nature. The novel itself. I made my characters much more extreme, of course, but I grew up with a little bit of an attachment disorder as well, just from my youth, and that's why I went back for a psychology degree to explore that and understand that, and the way that intimacy and vulnerability are all tied into love, and being able to express those things without pushing people away is a fear avoidant attachment disorder is actually what the character has. And so I think that to some extent it's an entirely fictionalized version of my own catharsis and learning to have a healthy relationship. And so that was a big driver. My personality is strewn through some of the main characters. I kind of wrote it down and then made it extreme for this character or that character. And I think that's a lot of where it came from. And the framework, once I had that idea, was easy because I loved the idea of what is the patient thinking about, what have they been through. And I don't know, creating a world where she could, it's all written first person present. And so she doesn't know what's going on, and she doesn't understand some of the surreal aspects of the book when she gets fentanyl pushes from the nurses, or she's stacking breasts against the ventilator or whatever. But I was able to create a real framework where she can go through these life experiences she's had, and some of it is flashback, most of it is not, and allow her to explore those same themes and go through some of those same experiences I did, and trying to learn what it meant to really have real friendship. I'd say ultimately the book it's not romantic in nature, it's about friendship.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. So the book itself has actually gone between the two worlds, like her inner mind world and the hospital world that she's in.
Well, not exactly, and that's sort of why it's a mystery. You don't really know she's in the hospital for 95% of the book.
Okay.
And like I said, mostly nurses figure it out a little earlier because I intersperse certain surreal aspects into the book that you're like, whoa, is she being suctioned right now? And so I think, usually I think your average reader figures out kind of like, oh, okay, there's something else going on here about 2/3 or 3/4 through the book. But like your nurses and ICU nurses in particular, I had one tell me they were like 40 pages in. They're like, oh, okay, I think I know what's going on. And they still loved the book. So it's not like it really diminishes your appreciation of it. And in fact,
Right,
you'll
right.
probably appreciate all the little details. As
I was
you'll
gonna say it
notice.
makes me want to read it more, knowing that it's like kind of set in like this type of setting.
Yeah, exactly. And well, like I said, as I've gone through this process, I spent a lot of time debating, like, how much do I share with people? I don't want to spoil that revelation. But that's really not a big part of the novel. Really, the novel is the character's journey through her attachment disorder, and hopefully she's ready for as she comes to and moves on with her life after her accident, that she's ready for more meaningful connections with her friends.
So, what is the name of the book?
It's called My Father's Indian, and it's subtitled "How a Butterfly Split the Yolk."
All right, so you're gonna have to explain that.
Incidentally, as a side, that was my view at my cabin.
Oh,
So
nice.
as I
That's
wrote
gorgeous.
the book, that's kind of what I was staring at, and I love the cover. I really wanted to capture Susie is my main character. I wanted to capture her emotional and physical isolation, and so you've got sort of the inversion layer here and the fog and the trees. It's very kind of an eerie, isolated picture, and then you've got these dark trees in the foreground blocking you from it. I was very pleased with the picture. I wanted to use one of my own wilderness photos, and I saw that one. I was just like, oh man, that's perfect.
Perfect.
Right, and it also ties it back to my own journey, being my view from the cabin and my own isolation in the woods. As far as explaining the title, I would say that is also a plot spoiler that is not shareable, and it's one of those things. I hope it's intriguing and draws people in. It's very intentionally vague, and it's one of those things that little bits and pieces of that title appear in the story, and kind of ties all together towards the end.
Okay. So, how long basically did it take you to get this book out?
Well, I think I mentioned the actual writing was about 6 months, and that was great. Loved it. I was so excited as I went through the process and really got to know the characters and saw them evolve, created character arcs, and it was rewarding. It was my own catharsis. There were parts where I cried while I was writing it, and that was just a great experience. 6 months. The next year after that was terrible. It's just part of the process, I guess, but going back through and editing it, trying to get an agent, we're trying to get publishers, getting people to read it and give me feedback. That process was very unpleasant for the most part. The industry is completely saturated, and as a unknown author without even a creative writing master's or something, which even those don't really give you a lot of clout. It's near impossible to get an actual agent's attention. You send them this personalized query and you give them a page of your writing and you're supposed to draw them in. And most of them don't even respond because they're totally slammed. And I just felt that to be very insulting. They could at least send you a form rejection.
A canned response or something. Thank you for your submission.
So at least I know it was received, but that's just not. And it's just a numbers game because it's so saturated. I read recently in 2016 there was 1.6 million independently published books, and though you think about all those people sending 50 or 100 queries to agents, I mean the agents are just swamped. I mean they have no time to deal with trying to find the next big author, and they basically just go with their current group is my understanding, and that's just the reality of it. And the best way for me to succeed as an author, if that were my long-term goal, which is still in debate, is to write another one. Now that I've had some success with one, it would be a lot easier to get someone's attention.
So how many agents are there out there? Are there literally thousands of agents or?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say how many, and it's also hard to ascertain their actual skill set. And they'll mention authors they represent, and it's rarely authors you know. If you do know the author, those agents are not accepting new clients. So I don't really know the answer to your question. There is surely thousands, maybe tens of thousands.
So what did you end up doing?
Well, I spent some time doing that query process and trying to get an agent, and hated it. I felt like nobody even read what I sent them. I've only got a couple of responses, and doing research, that's basically how it is for somebody who's unpublished. So I look back at that and I think, well, maybe I should have spent more time, because I definitely closed some doors by not being able to get into a real publishing house, as they say. But I'm not sure I made a mistake either, because it's just the odds of getting into anybody's hands that will, buy into you are so low. So I ended up I got real tired of that quickly. I sent out a lot less queries than your average new author. I think I was sort of insulted, to be honest with you. And I did a lot of research into self-publishing, and I ended up going through Amazon to self-publish initially, which was fine. And then I also, a few months later, signed with a distributor. So I have sort of two outlets where I'm distributing the book right now. And the greatest challenge for that, I mentioned that 1.6 million number a few minutes ago, is just trying to figure out how to stand out in that process. And I've been reading independent published since I did it myself, and there's a wide variety in quality. In fact, most of it is not very good. And so it's hard to get people's attention when that is where you are. But it's also the reality of the industry, since almost the only way to be a new author is to self-publish. You hear the success stories, of course, but they're 1 in 10 million. So I went to great lengths of research, typesetting. Sorry, I just looked through my book. I surrounded myself with like piles right here where I'm sitting now of all the books I own, and made it look like those as much as possible in terms of the typesetting and the formatting and font. Like all those things, really important in terms of making it look professional. And I was just recently picked up by Barnes & Noble, which of course is a great success. That puts me like, 99.9 percentile of independently published authors. And the reason for that is because to get to my point, a big reason for that is because it looks like not a self-published book. It looks very professional. It looks just like everything else on the shelf that they'd be proud to display. And then the other big driver is I finally, after great rigmarole and effort, got 2 professional critics to read it, and both of them reviewed it positively. So on the strength of those, the professional quality book as well as the reviews is why I got picked up.
Oh, wow. How did you get the critics to review it?
Well, I'm a little embarrassed to admit, but it's just the way the industry is you have to pay to even get them to consider it. And so that's what I did. And I feel like that on the front already excludes a lot of independently published types, because they can't afford to do that. And it wasn't exorbitantly expensive, but when you make just a few dollars per copy you sell, the idea of making that money back is pretty low. I also read your average independent published book sells 50 copies, which blows my mind, because that's, you spent thousands of hours on this thing. That's I would have been heartbroken if I sold 50 copies, I think.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you sharing this, because this is huge for, I think it helps to set expectations, especially for people like when we talk to nurses about writing books, we tend to write books as marketing tools. And, I think there's this perception that you'll write a book and make a lot of money. And I'm like, no, that's not why you're writing the book. I mean,
Right.
I guess it's possible, but I don't know really how to guide you in that process. But yeah, I mean, just to have, hear it, I think is just, thank you so much for talking about this, because it's so, like, it's real. We all pay for marketing in different ways, and marketing is one of the most expensive parts of basically any business. And how you spend that money is really important, and to be strategic with it is. I mean, that was a brilliant idea. It never occurred to me that you could do that. But that was brilliant.
Yeah, that ended up being a great investment to get the attention of the professional reviewers. Because, like I said, I wouldn't be getting out there now into the bookstores on the shelves without those. And I think a lot of people are afraid to take that step, because it's not like they're offering you a good review. they're like, we'll look at it and let you know if we'll write a review, um, and we're going to be honest. So that's very nerve-wracking.
Yeah, that's brutal.
But getting back to the financial side, I mean, I'll be frank, I'm still in the hole. I don't know if I'll ever dig out of it because the idea of how many books I'd have to sell to make back my marketing, I'd have to sell hundreds alone just for some of those professional reviews. But we'll see. It's just starting to pick up. If I can start to get where I'm selling thousands, that's where you start making a few dollars. But even then, the time I spent on this book, you look at my hourly. I don't even want to think about that. So it's more about I'm so proud of the book, and
Yes.
I love people reading it and getting back to me. I've sold it to a lot of people at the hospitals I worked at. That definitely worked in my favor. I've been in 6 different hospitals, and so I've reached out to them. I have flyers up in the break room and ICU and stuff like that, and that's been a great marketing opportunity for me. And this as well, just being introduced to another group of nurses, is really I think that's the group. Everybody seems to appreciate the emotional journey of the character, but the little added benefit of having the nursing perspective goes a long ways too in terms of enjoying the book.
Yeah, no, I love that. So, and when you think of publishers as well, I know a lot of the publishers want you to come ready-made with your own audience. So if you don't have 1 million followers or something, they don't really want much to do with you. So, basically you end up doing the marketing on your own regardless.
True story.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So have you been doing, what other types of marketing are you looking at, and how are you kind of pushing this forward?
Well, you effectively highlight mistake number 1. I've never really cared about social media. And even while I was writing the book, I didn't really think about it or, have a plan. I was just excited to be finally motivated to be writing this thing. I didn't even have I think I had a Twitter account, but I didn't have any followers until after I had published. And that was a mistake. Social media is a huge platform for being able to get people just aware. How do you stand out from these millions of independently published books or books in general? And so that was something I should have done in advance, is a lot more effort on the social media side, drumming up my book and getting people interested before I published it. And that, again, would be something I could remedy a little bit with the second book, where I've actually got a following and people interested in who I am. I did build a website also after publishing. Again, should have been before, but it's been a good driver for people to learn about the book. I'd love if anybody wanted to look at it. In this group, it's just ericdorseyauthor.com. And it does have a blog, or photo blog anyway, of some of my time living in the van, which a lot of people find interesting, and that drives some traffic. So having that, interesting aspects of my history has driven people to the book as well. And a lot of the book does take place in the wilderness, and so I'm obviously drawing my own experience on that. And other marketing, I've tried a lot of different things with different types of success. Amazon ads are not geared towards novels at all. I mean, it's not a microwave. And I learned that maybe the hard way, although I didn't spend a ton of money there. And maybe I got a little exposure where I was showing up on people's Amazon page. But I didn't make very many sales. And I certainly had a huge negative in terms of return on investment for my Amazon ads. And the issue with that, in a lot of advertising today, is I don't make very much per book. My royalty is pretty small. It's priced inexpensively in order to draw readers in, because that's really my goal. And because of that, thank you for putting up my website. I lost my train of thought. Anyway,
the Amazon ads, yeah.
That's okay. Yeah, Amazon ads. It's all cost per click, and you do your bidding. So you bid 50 cents or something to show my book to somebody you think is going to buy it. That's how it works. And they show it, and so the person clicks on it. You pay 50 cents. And the real issue with that on a novel is nobody who clicks on it once is going to buy it. At least not nobody, but it's a percentage thing. you get 100 clicks and you make a sale, or 50 if you're lucky, maybe 20. But if I'm paying 50 cents a click, I'm running in the hole every time. So that's a very ineffective way to market, I discovered. And Facebook is a little bit better because you can really tailor your audience in Facebook to who you want to reach out to. Currently building an ad specifically for nurses who like fiction, who like mysteries. You can really kind of narrow in on who you want the ad to be displayed to. And so it's the same cost per click method, but hopefully you're getting a lot more sales at a lower click rate.
Yeah, the whole marketing piece, the whole advertising marketing piece it can be very very expensive and very frustrating to navigate through. And we see it a lot with our nurses who will drive traffic to a website or something, and it's not enough just to have somebody see your website or see your book one time, like you're saying. It's kind of like one of those things where it has to be really targeted.
Yep.
But I feel like you have so many storylines coming through here, not just like from living in the van to your leaving your fancy job to your EMT stories. Like, you could appeal to so many different storylines on so many different podcasts. Here we're about nurses in business, which has nothing to do with your book, but it's the storyline that I think is really fascinating.
Yeah, I appreciate that commentary because I'm trying to drive traffic that way. Like I said, the whole van life is a feature of my website because that's what people are interested in, and much more so than a random book they've never heard of. And they go to the website to look at the van, and they're like, "Oh, he wrote this book. That sounds kind of interesting." And so that's a great way to drive traffic if you've got those types of unique characteristics. And the same thing is true for me. I have several professors reading my book right now because I think it could be used in a psychology classroom. And so I have a couple of psych professors from my history and my psych degrees, or my psych degree, as well as studied psych at a couple different colleges, just because I was interested. And so that's an outlet for me as well. I'm very hopeful that one of them at least will be like, okay, we'll try this in a senior seminar class to talk about attachment disorders, and we'll see how that goes. And then I also have, like, all my nursing professors have it, and some of them have loved it. And I think it could be introduced to nursing students as well. I always tell the students in my hospital about it. And, for a nursing student, it's like part escape to a fictionalized world and part research, because, they might they want to be an ICU nurse, or any kind of nurse might be interested in the content.
Well, there's no better way to learn than through story, right? Like, that's how we remember things.
Exactly, and especially an engaging one, and that's another part of my favorite feedback is it's a quick read, and once you get into it, which is towards the beginning, people tend to be like, okay, I couldn't put it down after that. After this happened in the story, I couldn't put it down, and that I think lends itself really well to students, because they can burn through a book in a weekend and they'll remember what happened.
Yeah, and the beginning part is important. So there's nothing worse. My mom would be like, "Oh, you just have to get through the first half of the book, and then it gets good." And I'm like, "Well, I don't want to read the first half of the book if it's not good."
True story. Yeah, I don't think mine picks up as fast as it should. To be honest, that's one of my regrets, and I should have put more action at the very beginning. But
well, so what is kind of like the timeline for this the second book coming out? Like, that's very ambitious, and to come up with a second book already.
Well, I have some ideas. I think I have a loose direction and plot, kind of stemming from my time in the ambulance. I think I could have some better action at the start to hook people in, and I'm really interested in relationships, particularly platonic or non-intimate anyway. And that would sort of be the driver as well, although I wouldn't use the same, I almost called it a gimmick, plot device as being a sedated patient. As far as timing, I haven't started it. I've written a plot, like a loose outline. I'm really trying to push this one more right now. I need to get more readers, more reviews, and that's a big driver right now.
Yeah.
So I don't really have a good answer. Hopefully we'll start it this year.
The good news is that once you finish that book, and if it took you 6 months to write the first one, maybe it'll be that same, but you already have an audience that's being built up, so the second one should be 1,000 times easier for you.
100%. Yeah, I think I'm not too worried about the writing, and I have so many insights now into what I would do differently on the marketing side, as well as possibly getting more attention from the literary world and agents and whatnot, based on my success here. But it's exciting to think about how that would go. I just need to some extent, everything in my book is extremely detailed. Like there's a lot of really minor details that make sense later, like it's all linked together. And that was the hardest part about writing it, probably. And that's a little intimidating to try to replicate that level of attention to the minor details and making it all tie together at the end and not earlier. And that gives me pause, because that took a lot of, once I had written the first book and then going back through it and ticking and tying everything together, it was rewarding, but it was kind of tedious. And I guess I'm a little uncertain of whether I could replicate that success, because I read this thing. I've read it recently. Actually, I reread it. And it's been a year and a half or so. Maybe. Yeah, well, over a year and a half since I finished it. And I marvel at it. I'm like, I can't believe I produced this. Like,
you're like, who wrote this? I was going to say, is it hard to read your stuff? Kind of like, it's hard for me to listen to podcasts that I've done, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like, I think the content's great, but it's hard to listen to my voice, and I don't know if it's the same thing with like writing.
A little bit, if you find something where, man, I wish I'd tweaked the sentence, or but I try to be like, okay, it's finished product. I'm not going to take that mindset. I'm just going to enjoy it. And it's really remarkable to reread and just be like, I can't believe I put this all together, where it comes together like this. And that it was very rewarding to reread it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I almost want to read it again, but I didn't give it a few months.
Well, congratulations on your book. I think that's awesome. I definitely looking forward to reading it. I'm down here in Mexico, and we don't really get mail down here, so I'm gonna have to wait until I get back in June before I get to it. But I'm very excited to read it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to pick up some readers in this call, but if not, I understand. I'm also very interested if anyone would like to reach out to me through my website and has additional questions and those kinds of things. I'm very open to that. And I do sell signed copies through my website if anyone's interested, but you can also find it anywhere online. And like I said, Barnes & Noble.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, Eric. Well, thank you so much for sharing this with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was really a pleasure, and I hope somebody got something out of it. I've learned a lot in this process, and I wish I could have watched one of these a year ago.
Yep. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody take care.